Over the years, Sam Novak's life had been a tapestry of discipline and order. A former military man turned security consultant, he built his company, Novak Security Consultants, with precision and integrity at its core. His no-nonsense approach to work mirrored his personal life. Sam believed in accountability, both in himself and those around him, and this unwavering standard had earned him a reputation as a dependable leader. Yet it was this very sense of order that made him particularly attuned to changes, even subtle ones, in his environment. Before launching his firm, Sam had spent a decade in the military, where he honed his analytical skills and developed a deep-seated appreciation for structure. Those years shaped him, not just professionally but personally. Returning to civilian life, he carried with him a commitment to excellence and a sharp eye for inconsistencies, a quality that would later serve him in ways he could not have anticipated. Sam Novak returned to his office on a typical Tuesday afternoon, settling in after lunch. He jotted down some thoughts on two ongoing projects, ideas that had come to him over his meal. Stepping out, he asked his secretary, Layla, to transcribe the notes. She was, as usual, mid-conversation on the phone. Without breaking her rhythm, she acknowledged him, promising to finish the task in half an hour. Then she casually mentioned she was speaking with Dylan, Sam's wife, and her daughter. Layla often chatted with Dylan during lunch breaks, something Sam tolerated without complaint. Dylan's part-time library job left her free on certain days, and Sam trusted Layla's efficiency regardless of personal calls. Returning to his office, Sam focused on his afternoon workload. The morning had been spent reviewing project updates at Novak Security Consultants, his firm. While most tasks were on track, two account representatives were falling short, disorganized, defensive, and prone to excuses. Sam detested dishonesty, finding it far more intolerable than mere incompetence. If they admitted to struggling, he'd reassign them to better-suited roles. Instead, their lack of accountability tested his patience. After addressing emails to maintain client relationships, Sam finally turned to the centerpiece of his afternoon, drafting plans for a security overhaul at an aging downtown hospital. Built in the 1930s, its last upgrade had been in the 1970s. He'd brainstormed preliminary ideas at home, saving them on a thumb drive. However, as he reached for it, he realized it wasn't in his briefcase. A quick mental review confirmed he'd left it on his dresser that morning. Frustrated by his oversight, he grabbed his coat to retrieve it. As he rushed past Layla, announcing his errand, her response was barely registered. Outside, Sam realized he'd forgotten his car keys in his office. Retracing his steps, he heard Layla's tense voice on the phone, urging someone to hurry. She seemed startled when he reappeared to retrieve his keys, brushing off the encounter with a joke about his forgetfulness. Driving home, Sam replayed Layla's tone, curious about the he she had mentioned. At home, Dylan appeared flustered, claiming she'd been doing laundry. Her reddened face and hurried demeanor caught Sam's attention, but he brushed it off. Heading upstairs, he found the thumb drive on the dresser. The unmade bed and laundry hamper, half filled with clothes, suggested Dylan had been working on household chores. Yet, a minor inconsistency gave him pause. The toilet seat was up. Dylan had long been vocal about her dislike for this particular habit of his. After using the bathroom, he put the seat down, noting her apparent oversight. On his way out, Sam kissed Dylan's cheek. "Sorry about the seat," he said lightly. She seemed momentarily startled before recovering. "Lucky for you, I didn't notice," she teased. Something about her hesitation lingered in his mind as he left for work. When Sam stepped into the garage to get in his car, a faint but strange odor caught his attention. He glanced toward the workbench, suspecting a spill, but found nothing amiss. Shrugging it off, he drove back to the office. On his return, he noticed Layla studying him for a moment, though she said nothing. His inbox had filled in his brief absence, so he dove into clearing it out. Junk emails were deleted swiftly, but many messages required immediate attention. The bulk of the issues stemmed from the same account reps whose sloppy work created constant headaches. Sam resolved again to address their behavior. Their carelessness was frustrating enough, but the lies they used to cover their tracks were intolerable. Later, Layla handed him a shopping list from Dylan and reminded him about the evening's homeowners association meeting. Sam groaned. 2 hours of petty disputes and wasted time. After a frustrating day, he returned home with just enough time to eat a quick meal Dylan had prepared, change into casual clothes, and attend the meeting. It dragged on for 2.5 hours, achieving nothing. When they got home, they put the day behind them and enjoyed a tender night together before falling asleep. The next day, Wednesday, was relatively uneventful. Sam made some progress on the hospital security project, but had to deal with a major client issue in the suburbs. A recently installed surveillance system wasn't functioning properly because the account rep overseeing the installation failed to follow the system test checklist. Sam identified the error instantly, a misplaced plug, but fumed at the negligence as he drove back. Dylan worked her afternoon shift at the library, so Sam took his time getting home. His thoughts wandered to the minor oddities of the past day. At work, the recurring problems with his team weighed on him, and at home, several small things didn't quite add up. The odor in the garage lingered in his memory, though it was gone now. Once home, he decided to be productive and folded the bed linens in the dryer. Oddly, there was only one set, the sheets from their bed. Dylan was usually energy conscious and wouldn't run a small load. After putting the sheets away, he noticed another anomaly. The toilet seat in their bathroom was down. He distinctly remembered leaving it up the previous morning. Stranger still, Dylan had made the bed Tuesday morning only to strip it later for washing, something she never did. The inconsistencies unsettled him. As someone who valued precision, these small anomalies felt like red flags. He tried to brush off the unease, but it lingered. Sitting down with a beer, he dozed off until Dylan returned with Chinese takeout. They ate in near silence. Sam had intended to ask her about the oddities, but fatigue dulled his focus. They cleaned up, cuddled on the couch, and went to bed. The next morning, Sam woke feeling off. He didn't mention it to Dylan, knowing she would worry excessively. Instead, he took a couple of aspirin and went through his routine. By the time he arrived at the office, the headache had faded slightly, but a nagging unease about the small anomalies at home remained in the back of his mind. He managed to handle some routine tasks, but avoided the more demanding hospital project. By late morning, his condition worsened. He felt feverish and unsteady. Layla began checking on him frequently, asking if he was okay. Brushing off her concerns, he insisted he was just tired. For lunch, he opted for light noodles and broth, but even that didn't help for long. By mid-afternoon, he felt too weak to continue. Stepping into the hall to get Layla's attention, he barely made it before she jumped up in alarm. "Sam, you look awful," she exclaimed, touching his forehead. "You're burning up. I'm taking you home." She hesitated briefly, glanced at the clock, then added, "Wait in reception. I'll join you in a minute." Sam insisted he could drive, but she quickly shut that down, calling Timothy, a colleague, to help escort him. Timothy got him partway down the hall, but excused himself to lock his office, leaving Sam leaning against the wall. In that moment, Sam overheard Layla's tense voice on the phone. "Dylan, listen, Sam's really sick, and I'm bringing him home now. Don't freak out, just deal with it." Her tone turned sharper. "Tell him to leave. I don't care what he thinks. Tough luck." The next thing Sam remembered was being helped into an unfamiliar car by Timothy and Roy, the security guard, before passing out. When he came to again, Layla and Timothy were guiding him into his house, where Dylan was waiting, visibly distressed. "We should take him to the hospital," Dylan fretted, her voice shaking. "Nonsense," Layla replied firmly. "It's just a bad flu. He needs rest, not a trip to the ER. Let's settle him on the couch. He's too weak to manage the stairs." Sam vaguely recalled Layla giving him something to drink before she left, promising to check on him later. As he drifted into restless sleep, a sudden realization struck him. Gaultier. The strange odor he'd noticed earlier was men's cologne. He mumbled the name but was too weak for anyone to hear. Half awake later, he overheard Dylan on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low but firm. "Trevor, I'm done. Sam's here and he needs me. I'm not sneaking off to meet you at some motel. This is over. Today was the last straw. You were a distraction, not some grand romance. I don't care about your threats. Sam is nothing like the guy you bullied in high school. If you try anything, he'll destroy you." Sam lay motionless as the call ended, overwhelmed by the implications. Moments later, he heard Layla's voice, calm but resolute. "Good riddance, should have ended this months ago." "Mom, enough," Dylan replied. "It's over now and Sam doesn't know. Let's leave it at that." When the conversation subsided, Sam croaked weakly, bringing them both rushing to his side. Dylan asked if their talking had woken him, but he feigned ignorance, blaming a sore throat and cough. They seemed relieved and quickly fetched him something sweet and cold to drink. Sam sipped the juice, his mind swirling with fragmented thoughts. For now, he chose silence, unsure of how or when he'd address what he had learned. Sam's stomach churned as he spent most of Friday in the downstairs bathroom, his body racked with relentless waves of sickness. With nothing substantial to eat in over a day, even the meager noodles he'd managed to stomach came back up, followed by dry heaves that left him exhausted. By noon, Dylan had left for her library shift, and Layla returned to the office, leaving him alone in his misery. The isolation gave him time to think, though not by choice. Between bouts of retching, his thoughts drifted to recent revelations about Dylan, Layla, and Trevor. Clarity began to form, piece by piece. Trevor's cologne, the misplaced toilet seat, the stripped sheets, each was a puzzle piece that now clicked into place. Layla's phone calls had tipped them off, protecting their affair. Sam realized how blind he'd been to the signs, even without hearing Dylan's damning conversation with Trevor days earlier. By afternoon, his stomach settled enough for clear fluids. A few sips revived him, and he risked venturing out of the bathroom, grabbing a book to distract his mind. When Dylan returned early from work, she was visibly relieved to see him upright. She explained that the doctor recommended rest and fluids, and antibiotics wouldn't help with the virus. Sam, still weak but mentally sharp, said little. He now fully understood the betrayal and its players. Dylan fussed over him, urging him to move upstairs for comfort. But Sam refused, unable to bear the thought of lying in the same bed where Trevor had intruded on their marriage. He insisted on staying on the couch, claiming it was fine. Later that evening, he asked if Layla would be coming by the next day. Dylan explained that her mother had plans, a nature hike and dinner with her boyfriend. Sam cut her off, insisting she cancel. His voice was calm but firm, leaving no room for argument. Dylan hesitated but made the call. Her voice hushed as she relayed his request to Layla. Sam overheard her concern. "Mom, you'd better come. I think he knows." Feigning sleep for the rest of the evening, Sam replayed everything in his mind. As night fell, he rejected Dylan's offer again to move upstairs. Instead, he listened as the phone rang, followed by Dylan shouting from another room. "No, you idiot! Never again! Screw you!" The call ended with the sound of her slamming the phone. By Saturday morning, Sam felt slightly stronger after a long shower, though the emotional weight lingered. Dressed and refreshed, he stood quietly in the bedroom doorway, observing Dylan asleep. She still stirred something primal in him, but the emotions now were a mix of habit and biology. His mind, however, lingered on Trevor. He recalled him as one of the high school jocks who used to bully him, a man he once despised. That old anger flared, sharp and hot, but he pushed it down. For now, he decided, there would be no confrontation. Like a seasoned general holding back before the decisive moment, Sam tucked his emotions away. Not yet. Sam changed into a pair of jeans and a casual shirt, opting for comfort. After checking the doctor's suggested recovery schedule, he settled on toast with a thin spread of jelly for breakfast, skipping his usual coffee for tea. The clock read 10:35 a.m. He left a brief note for Dylan. Back by noon, he wanted to confront her and Layla together, avoiding drawn-out questions in the meantime. Driving aimlessly, Sam's thoughts churned. Life, like work, required accountability. Mistakes happened, but lying to cover them up was intolerable. Dylan had betrayed him, violated their marriage, and lied to mask her actions. Layla had enabled her, complicit in the deception. Could he forgive them? Could he trust them again? He didn't have those answers yet, but he was determined to get the truth. At exactly noon, Sam pulled into the driveway behind Layla's car. Inside, he found Dylan and Layla seated at the kitchen table. They fell silent as he entered. Pouring himself a cautious cup of coffee, Sam sat across from them. "Thanks for your care these past few days," he began, his tone even. Layla smiled nervously, but Dylan sat rigid, anticipating more. "Here's the situation," he continued. "I believe my wife, Dylan, was sleeping with Trevor Brooks in our bed this past Tuesday and Thursday. Layla, you acted as their lookout. Am I wrong?" Dylan's face froze in shock, while Layla flinched, accidentally knocking her coffee cup to the floor. The two scrambled to clean up the mess, stalling the conversation, but Sam waited patiently. Once they resumed their seats, Dylan opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand to silence her. "It's my turn to speak," he said firmly. "Dylan, Tuesday morning you made the bed, something you never do if you're about to strip it for washing. When I returned that afternoon, I smelled men's cologne in the garage. It wasn't mine. Afterward, you were doing laundry, but the dryer held only our bed sheets, nothing else. Why? To remove evidence, perhaps." He didn't wait for a reply. "Layla, I overheard you that morning warning Dylan to hurry because I was on my way. Thursday, it was the same, telling her to get him out of there." Dylan shook her head, denying everything. "Sam, this is crazy. I've never cheated on you. There are explanations for all of it." Sam ignored her protests. "Dylan, no more lies. If you want this marriage to have any chance, tell the truth. Did you sleep with him? Did you use protection?" Tears welled in Dylan's eyes, but she stayed silent. Layla wept openly. Sam studied Dylan, noticing the familiar, calculating expression he'd seen countless times on dishonest employees. Finally, she relented. Trevor was my boyfriend in high school, Dylan admitted. We were on and off through college, and while I knew he wasn't good for me, he kept pulling me back. After graduation, I ended things for good. He married someone else and had kids. I thought he was out of my life until he reached out a few months ago. At first, it was just nostalgic conversations. It wasn't supposed to go further. Sam's voice was icy. But it did. Dylan hesitated, her words faltering. Yes, she whispered. It did. I don't know why. I was stupid. It started a few months ago. I ended it, Sam. I swear I ended it. Sam leaned back, his face unreadable. Inside, his anger burned, but he kept it contained. You didn't end it. Circumstances did. And Layla, you enabled this. You lied to me. Both of you did. Layla began apologizing, but Sam cut her off. Save it. I'm not interested in excuses. He stood, pushing his chair back with controlled force. We'll finish this conversation later, after I decide what happens next. He walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. In his mind, he resolved that the next steps wouldn't be about saving anyone's feelings. They'd be about determining whether trust, once shattered, could ever be rebuilt. Over 6 years ago, life brought Dylan back into Sam's world, and he was astonished by how time and life experiences had shaped her. She exuded strength and confidence, qualities that reignited his love for her. When she accepted his marriage proposal, it felt like a dream, and Sam had poured every ounce of sincerity into their vows. Months ago, as their high school reunion approached, Dylan had hoped Sam would attend with her. But he had resisted, dismissing such events as shallow gatherings full of insincere posturing, something he'd witnessed at reunions of others. Dylan had felt disappointed, believing that if he truly loved and respected her wishes, he would have accompanied her. Looking back, she admitted that her feelings might have been childish, but they were genuine. At the reunion, Dylan found herself enjoying the company of her former classmates. Unlike Sam, who had felt like an outsider during their school years, she had been part of the popular crowd and had fond memories of those times. Trevor, an old flame, was there too, attending alone and without a wedding ring. Although she wore hers, it didn't seem to deter him. Trevor made a bold attempt to rekindle something with her, which she initially laughed off. However, his persistence over the following months wore her down. Finally, she agreed to meet him for lunch, which led to dinner at a local lounge. Though she knew it was wrong, Dylan admitted she concealed it from Sam. Over drinks that night, Trevor made his moves. And while she claimed things only went as far as brief physical contact, she acknowledged how easily she'd succumbed to the excitement and thrill. She justified her actions to herself at the time, thinking it wasn't a true betrayal. Returning home, she avoided Sam, rationalizing her ability to keep the affair hidden. Her guilt was momentarily eclipsed by her confidence that Sam's unwavering trust in her would prevent him from suspecting anything. Dylan confessed that the affair continued. Trevor's calls persisted, and she agreed to see him again. Each encounter left her grappling with guilt, yet she found herself drawn to the allure of danger and forbidden excitement. She even confided in her mother, Layla, enlisting her help to cover for the meetings. Layla, torn between protecting her daughter and safeguarding her son-in-law, reluctantly went along with the deception. Layla defended her complicity, explaining that her primary fear was that Sam might discover the affair and act out in a way that could ruin his life. Her intention, she claimed, was to protect everyone involved, though the weight of the secret deeply troubled her. Dylan eventually broke things off with Trevor, citing the final straw as his suggestion that she leave Sam, who was ill at the time, to meet him at a motel. She insisted she had ended the relationship and regretted her weakness, which she attributed to the history she shared with Trevor. Dylan declared her love for Sam and her desire to mend their relationship. She promised to attend counseling or take any steps necessary to make amends. Layla pleaded for Sam's forgiveness, expressing that her actions stemmed from being trapped in an impossible situation, caught between her loyalty to her daughter and her affection for Sam. As the two women looked to Sam for his response, he grappled with his feelings of betrayal. Layla's silence during Dylan's deception stung deeply. Dylan's confession, with its mix of rationalizations and apologies, left him wrestling with whether forgiveness was truly possible. The weight of the decision lay heavy on him, and both women awaited his next move. What a mess. Sam felt an icy numbness settle over him as he watched his life unravel. He knew it was time to face the hard truth and bring things to an end. Dylan, he began, his voice steady but cold. You cheated and then lied to my face. I know this started at the reunion and has carried on for 3 months. You've been involved with Trevor the whole time. And you're still lying to me now, pretending otherwise. You can't keep a 3-month affair alive with half measures. Spare me the denials. I see it for what it is. And your mother? She betrayed me too, lying to cover for you. I've been made a fool of by both of you. Dylan couldn't meet his gaze, burying her face in her hands, while Layla, ever composed, tried to reason with him. What are you planning to do, Sam? Layla asked, her tone pleading. Please don't make a rash decision. Think this through. Sam's response was sharp. I won't rush into anything, but I won't let it drag out either. The betrayal is bad enough, but the constant lying to cover it up? That's what makes it unforgivable. I can't trust either of you again. I'll be contacting a divorce attorney next week. Since I don't have direct evidence of adultery, I'll pursue other grounds, but if you fight me, Dylan, I'll take it further. I'll make Trevor's involvement public and I'll sue him for alienation of affection. If necessary, I'll have investigators combing the neighborhood, questioning neighbors about his visits. I'll dig into his work records to see if he came here during work hours. If you cooperate, though, I'll agree to a no-fault divorce and fair alimony. After all, you were a good wife for 6 years, and that means something. I'll give you a month to move out. I assume you'll stay with Layla. Layla nodded reluctantly. Yes, of course, but Sam, can't you give it more time? You and Dylan had a good marriage for 6 years. She made a mistake, a terrible one, but she's learned her lesson. She'll never do it again. Never, Dylan echoed faintly. Sam's expression hardened. You still don't understand. There's no way back from this. You lied, even after I gave you a chance to come clean. I'll never believe another word either of you says. And with that, the decision was made. The beginning of the end. Sam moved into the guest room upstairs that night. By Monday morning, he was at a clinic getting tested for STDs. He didn't trust where Trevor might have been during those months of betrayal and urged Dylan to get tested as well, though he doubted she'd follow through. Her choices were no longer his concern. His results came back clean, though follow-ups would be necessary for HIV. Feeling a sense of responsibility, he decided someone else needed to know. That same day, he called Caroline, Trevor's wife. Her initial reaction was suspicious, especially when he wouldn't disclose his reason for calling. She reluctantly agreed to meet him at an IHOP near the interstate, emphasizing she had only an hour before picking up her kids from daycare. When Caroline arrived, Sam noted how different she was from Dylan. She had a striking beauty, her dark Irish features accentuated by jet black hair and milky white skin, but there was a toughness in her demeanor that set her apart. After they were seated, something she mentioned unsettled him. You were home when I called, Sam said bluntly. Why do you have your kids in daycare if you're home all day? Big social life? Caroline laughed at his audacity. Well, aren't you the nosy amateur social worker? My kids are at Mrs. Jones's for half the day so I can run my home-based graphics business. I work while they're there, and when they're home, it's full-time mom duty. I adjust my schedule as needed. Trevor prefers me working from home, probably worried I'll meet someone like him if I'm out in the world. Her retort caught him off guard, and he couldn't help but nod, satisfied with her explanation. She wasn't neglecting her kids after all. Now, she said, her tone firm, about your call. How do you know all this about Trevor? Do you have proof? Sam laid it all out, the affair, his suspicions, and what he had overheard. Caroline listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she simply nodded. I'm not surprised, she admitted. I've suspected him of cheating before, several times actually, especially after the twins were born. I nearly left him 2 years ago when I caught him, but I stayed for the kids. They were too young for daycare, and I had no way to support myself back then. Trevor's always been more of an absentee dad anyway. Without concrete proof, I couldn't do much. Her words hung in the air, a reflection of the tangled mess of betrayals that now connected their lives. Caroline had no illusions about achieving an amicable divorce. She explained that 2 years ago, she had started her business to gain financial independence, preparing for a future where she might need to stand on her own. When Sam shared that he had recently undergone STD tests, she mentioned having done the same when Trevor's behavior first raised suspicions. She agreed it was time to repeat the tests. Sam acknowledged that one reason he had contacted her was to suggest testing, but there was more. He explained that if his divorce with Dylan became contentious, he might have to call Caroline as a witness regarding Trevor's weekday activities. This would inevitably put her name into public records, linking her to the case. Caroline, however, seemed unfazed. She reasoned that her young children wouldn't grasp the implications, and she had little concern about public attention. She even remarked that with Trevor's pattern of behavior, it wouldn't be surprising if an angry spouse eventually retaliated against him violently. To her, it was only a matter of time before his recklessness caught up with him, potentially exposing everything anyway. Sam couldn't help but admire her strength. Caroline carried herself with an air of resilience, focusing on protecting her children despite the mess surrounding Trevor. She struck him as a tough, practical person, and he wondered why she seemed so familiar. The conversation turned to Trevor's character. Caroline didn't hold back, describing him as a predator without a conscience, someone who would destroy lives in pursuit of his desires. She speculated that he was systematically pursuing women from their high school class, relying on his lingering reputation as the charming quarterback. Though Caroline admitted she wanted a divorce, she lamented the lack of concrete evidence to support her case in court. There were rumors and circumstantial signs, but nothing actionable. She was resigned to the situation, though her frustration was evident. Caroline even reflected darkly on how much simpler life would be if something, or someone, removed Trevor from the picture. She explained that Trevor's deep-seated paranoia about potential retaliation had driven him to secure extensive life insurance policies, even including a double indemnity clause for violent death. Ironically, his fear of consequences revealed a rare glimmer of concern for his family, as the policies would leave them financially secure. As they prepared to leave, Caroline mused about wishing for some force, a natural disaster, an act of fate, or even a vengeful husband, to take Trevor out of their lives permanently. She believed that without him, her children and others would be better off. Sam cautioned her to be careful what she wished for, leaving her momentarily thoughtful. While they walked to Caroline's car, she studied Sam closely. A flicker of recognition crossed her face as she recalled him from high school. She remembered him as the tall, quiet boy who had been mercilessly picked on, yet had stepped in to protect her during a confrontation at a school dance. Though she had been whisked away by friends that night, she had never forgotten his courage. Sam, too, remembered the incident clearly. After helping her escape the unwanted attention of a football player named Alistair, Sam had faced the consequences alone. Alistair and his friends had beaten him up, and while they avoided punishment due to their status as athletes, Sam had been suspended for the rest of the semester. He explained that the situation had pushed him to enlist in the military before graduation, where he found discipline and direction. Caroline asked about Alistair's fate, and Sam recounted how shortly after their encounter, Alistair had been arrested for pills possession. Federal authorities had been involved, and justice had been served, proving that sometimes karma did its job. As Caroline listened, she seemed moved by Sam's story. Before parting, she gave him a light kiss on the cheek, expressing her gratitude and admiration for his bravery back then. Sam watched her drive away, thinking about the unexpected twists life had taken. Returning to his office, Sam took decisive action on unrelated matters. He terminated 2 underperforming employees, ensuring their severance was handled properly. Their records were airtight, leaving no room for disputes. In that moment, Sam reflected on the importance of clean breaks, not just in his professional life, but also in the personal turmoil he was navigating. Sam began the process by meeting with his division managers to identify potential candidates for promotions. He emphasized that the decisions would be their responsibility. They knew the team better than he did, and he made it clear he wouldn't promote anyone he didn't trust or know personally. He instructed them to make recommendations through a committee process, warning that they would be accountable if their choices failed to meet expectations. Afterward, Sam made some adjustments within his company. He contacted the HR department and arranged to transfer Layla to a suburban warehouse facility, where she would take over for a retiring office manager. When Layla anxiously came into his office to hear his decision, Sam explained the situation bluntly. Though he acknowledged her value as an employee, he expressed his loss of trust in her personal loyalty, a breach he couldn't overlook. He informed her of the transfer, which included a slight salary increase and potential for further promotion. He wished her well and ended the conversation curtly. Layla apologized, but Sam was unmoved, tired of hearing empty regrets. Before the transfer, Sam ensured her new supervisor was prepared to help her transition smoothly. As far as he knew, the manager was unaware of the underlying reasons for the move. Sam highlighted Layla's skills and past contributions to reinforce her reputation professionally, even as he distanced himself personally. On Monday evening, Sam consulted a lawyer who could accommodate his busy schedule with evening hours. By the next day, the divorce papers were filed. The lawyer assured him the process could proceed quickly if Dylan didn't contest it, and Sam was confident there would be no resistance. A couple of weeks later, Sam hired movers to pack Dylan's belongings. Most of the items were smaller, personal purchases she had accumulated over the years. He left her in charge of the move, avoiding the house that weekend to spare himself the emotional strain of her presence. The process was difficult, but he focused on moving forward. Weeks after the separation, Sam received an unexpected call from Caroline. She was checking in and asked how he was managing everything. He shared updates about Dylan moving out, Layla's transfer, and the divorce proceedings. Caroline remarked on how composed he seemed, noting his methodical approach. Sam explained that when faced with unpleasant tasks, he preferred to make a list and tackle it step by step. Caroline teased that he seemed close to wrapping up his list, with both Dylan and Layla physically removed from his life and bachelorhood on the horizon. Sam admitted there were still a few loose ends to address. When she pressed, asking if she was included in his plans, Sam jokingly flipped through papers, pretending to search for her name. She laughed off his playful response, saying it was better to be on the list late than not at all. In his methodical fashion, Sam continued working through his list. Using a pocket notepad instead of digital tools to avoid leaving a trail, he ticked off each item with precision. 2 appraisers evaluated the house, and their reports were sent to Dylan and her lawyer. Once they agreed on an average value, Sam secured a second loan to cover the equity difference, sending Dylan her share in a cashier's check. He dismantled their large bed, carefully inspecting the frame for serial numbers or branding. Anything traceable was removed or sanded off before the bed was stored in his garage. The mattress and box spring were treated the same way, ensuring no connections to him remained. After receiving the court's ruling on temporary alimony, Sam calculated the retroactive payments from their separation date and sent Dylan a cashier's check for the full amount owed. He then set up an automatic transfer for future payments directly to her savings account, completing yet another item on his list. With every task completed, Sam took another step toward closing this chapter of his life. Each checkmark symbolized progress, a deliberate move toward reclaiming control and independence in the aftermath of betrayal. Sam reached out to Caroline after some time, updating her on his progress. He jokingly mentioned she had climbed to item number 43 on his infamous list, a lighthearted acknowledgement of their growing connection. He shared details about settling his financial obligations with Dylan, ensuring everything aligned with their legal agreements. Caroline asked how Dylan was doing. Sam admitted he wasn't entirely sure, as their interactions had been limited to a single meeting at the lawyer's office. When she inquired about any lingering doubts or regrets, Sam reflected on his feelings. While he regretted the outcome and mourned the 6 years he had invested in their marriage, he recognized that trust, once broken, couldn't be restored. Despite still loving Dylan, he knew there was no way to rebuild what had been lost. Caroline expressed sympathy for Sam, confessing she envied his ability to trust someone so deeply. It had been so long since she'd trusted Trevor that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Their conversation trailed off into silence, both lost in thought, before they exchanged goodbyes with a promise to stay in touch. 2 months later, Sam and Caroline met at a park. They walked together, their conversation weaving through lighthearted memories of high school. Sam admitted to having crushes on a few classmates, and Caroline teased him for not realizing some of those girls might have reciprocated his interest. When he asked if she would have dated him back then, she admitted she probably wouldn't have, at least not until she realized the shallow nature of the popular crowd she had aspired to join. However, after he stood up for her at the dance, her perspective shifted, and she began to see him differently. She had searched for him at school afterward, but hadn't known his name to ask about him. As they strolled, Caroline observed how much Sam had changed. He admitted he'd been working on his fitness, shedding extra weight and regaining the strength he'd had during his military service. Caroline playfully chided him for being almost too fit, joking that he needed a little more softness for comfort. Their banter carried an easy warmth, and when they parted, Caroline surprised him with a sweet, brief kiss. Sam had wanted to kiss her but refrained, worried he might lose control of his emotions. Her gesture felt like a gift, carefully balanced between affection and restraint. Weeks passed, and Sam neared the finalization of his divorce. One evening, he called Caroline to ask if Trevor was around. She replied that Trevor was away for a couple of weeks, likely preoccupied with someone else. Sam suggested going out for dinner, but Caroline declined, explaining that it wasn't a good time. She promised, however, that she'd be open to meeting in about 3 weeks and asked him to call again. When Sam followed up, he offered to cover the cost of a sitter, considering her situation. Caroline seemed touched by the gesture and informed him that Mrs. Jones, her neighbor, had offered to keep the twins overnight if needed. While she didn't plan on taking advantage of that, she expressed enthusiasm about seeing him again. She mentioned that Mrs. Jones suspected she was keeping a secret lover, largely because she seemed happier lately. Caroline assured Sam that her neighbor's assumptions were based on nothing concrete, though she appreciated the sentiment. During their dinner, Caroline turned the tables, asking if Sam had been feeling happier. He admitted he wasn't sure, but acknowledged that their conversations and meetings had brought him a sense of calm. She asked where she ranked on his list now, and he jokingly placed her at item number 9, signaling her growing importance in his life. Later, as they talked in her living room, Sam couldn't help but ask questions about her children. Caroline noticed his curiosity and pressed him about it. Sam explained that he had always wanted children, but Dylan had resisted, insisting they enjoy life as a couple without the constraints of parenting. He suspected Dylan had viewed children as an inconvenience, a limitation on their freedom and spontaneity. His wistful tone revealed a longing he had carried quietly for years, a desire to experience fatherhood and the joy that came with it. Their conversation deepened, leaving both of them reflecting on their past choices and how those choices had shaped their lives. Sam glanced out the window, his thoughts momentarily distant. Caroline's voice broke the silence, reminding him of a conversation from his marriage. Dylan had never wavered in her resistance to having children, even after 6 years. Sam had eventually stopped bringing it up, realizing that if she didn't want children by then, she likely never would. And he wasn't sure what kind of mother she'd have been anyway. Caroline shifted the subject, contrasting her own experience. Life with Trevor, she reflected, hadn't been the carefree adventure it might have seemed. It had depended far too much on the kind of partner you had. Her tone sharpened as she asked Sam why he was there. Did he have feelings for her? Was he sitting there, aroused by her presence? Caught off guard but honest, Sam admitted he found her attractive. However, he quickly added that his intentions were honorable. He wanted a friendship, not an affair, and he also wanted to get to know her children if she was open to it. Caroline hesitated, acknowledging the risks. Her kids might inadvertently mention Uncle Sam to Trevor, and she couldn't take that chance. For their safety, she asked him to keep things casual, conversations and occasional walks. Sam agreed, understanding her caution. He wanted no connection to Trevor beyond what already existed. As he prepared to leave, Caroline stopped him. She turned away and began lifting her top, revealing pale, unmarked skin at first. But then the bruises appeared, blue and purple blotches along her lower back and sides. She explained that Trevor's violence was infrequent and controlled, his open hand leaving bruises rather than inflicting severe injury. However, the mistreatment had escalated recently, especially after Dylan ended their affair. Trevor's frustration had spilled over into physical aggression. Caroline admitted she had canceled a prior outing with Sam because of a black eye Trevor had given her. Her skin, she noted bitterly, made bruises slow to heal and hard to hide. Sam's resolve cracked. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. She turned to face him, allowing the embrace for a moment before stepping back and pulling her top down. He thanked her for trusting him with such a vulnerable truth. And as they said goodbye, she kissed him again, a kiss that left him certain it was time to act. Sam's divorce was finalized with little drama, marked by irreconcilable differences. Dylan had requested a final meeting to apologize once more, but her words changed nothing. 2 weeks later, Sam was officially free. Now, his focus turned to Trevor. He visited a suburban shopping center and found an ad on a bulletin board for a used pickup truck. The seller, needing to move overseas, was unloading the truck and other household items quickly. The vehicle was old, dented, and battered, but functional, perfect for Sam's purposes. He paid in cash, obtained the title, and burned it that same evening. The following day, he took the truck off-road in a local park, covering it in mud to disguise its recent purchase. Satisfied, he moved on to the next step. Sam drove far into the countryside, revisiting a desolate area he remembered hunting in with his father as a child. The landscape was as bleak as he recalled. Abandoned coal mines, mounds of tailings, and illegally dumped trash scattered across the land. The neglect of decades remained untouched. Smiling grimly, he confirmed it was exactly the setting he needed. Returning home after dark, Sam parked the truck in his garage and loaded it with the dismantled parts of a large bed. He drove back to the mining site, arriving under cover of night. Using discarded wood and crates from the site, He constructed a makeshift platform and reassembled the bed on top of it. The task was effortless. He had practiced assembling and disassembling the bed in his garage in total darkness. With everything in place, Sam doused the structure in gasoline and struck a kitchen match, igniting it. Flames consumed the bed, casting flickering light across the barren landscape. It was a modern makeshift version of a Viking funeral, marking the symbolic end of a chapter in his life. Sam watched as the fire raged, then turned and drove away, leaving the smoldering remains behind. Trevor wasn't exactly acting like a stoic hero. He was very much alive when it began. Sam had ensured he wasn't hurt any more than necessary to bring him to this moment. From experience, Sam knew that overwhelming someone too early dulled their awareness, and he wanted Trevor fully conscious of the consequences of his actions. To Sam, Trevor wasn't just another person who had made mistakes. He was a symbol of harm, someone who had shattered families, taken advantage of trust, and left lasting scars. Trevor's actions had destroyed Sam's marriage, hurt Caroline, and caused pain to others. For Sam, one thing was clear. Trevor's behavior had to be confronted and stopped. Trevor's screams echoed for 11 minutes. When silence finally fell, Sam used Trevor's phone to call in an anonymous tip to the local sheriff's office, wiped the device clean, and tossed it onto the burning pyre. The task was complete. Sam didn't feel an ounce of guilt. He had done worse to better men during his military service. Trevor, in comparison, deserved every second of it. Driving south in the battered pickup truck he had acquired for this purpose, Sam continued his plan. He traveled for hours until he reached a dingy strip mall with a 24-hour diner. After fueling up at a nearby Citgo, he parked the truck conspicuously and left the key in the ignition. He deliberately walked past a group of rowdy young men who loitered near the diner, casually bumping one and provoking a glare. But Sam's commanding presence dissuaded them from reacting. After a slice of pie and coffee, he exited the diner to find the truck predictably gone. He walked a mile to a bus depot, caught a ride home, and slept peacefully the entire way. In the days that followed, investigators identified Trevor's remains. The unusual circumstances surrounding his death drew significant attention, leading detectives to delve into his life. Their investigation revealed connections to Dylan, tracing back to the high school reunion. They compiled a hefty file on Trevor, and Sam inevitably became a person of interest. His service record, though partially redacted, hinted at his expertise in unconventional warfare, making him a compelling figure for the detectives. Detective Sergeant Bishop questioned Sam extensively. Bishop probed why Sam, as the president of his company, had personally traveled to a client's site on the same day Trevor met his end. Sam explained that the client, a close friend and former commanding officer, had specifically requested his expertise. When asked about his military record, including his Silver Star commendation, Sam deflected, pointing out its irrelevance to the investigation. Bishop pressed further, recounting Sam's actions during a mission where he had single-handedly eliminated 43 hostiles to save his injured teammates. Sam's responses were calm and measured, his demeanor unwavering. The detective shifted focus to the new bed Sam had purchased shortly before Trevor's death. Bishop asked what had happened to the old one, and Sam claimed he had donated it to Goodwill, providing a receipt to back his story. Though Goodwill confirmed the donation, the bed's trail ended there, as it had been sold for cash. The lead fizzled, leaving detectives with a multitude of other potential suspects to explore. During the weeks following Trevor's demise, Sam maintained his routine while the investigation unfolded. Caroline called 3 months after Trevor's funeral, just a week after Sam's divorce was finalized. Her timing didn't surprise him. Their earlier conversations had hinted at her awareness of certain events. Still, Sam wondered what she wanted. Was it blackmail? Exposure? He knew it was one thing to wish someone dead, but quite another to face the grim reality of that wish being fulfilled. When they spoke, Caroline revealed her intentions. Blackmail of a sort. She demanded his presence, but not for money or secrets. Instead, she insisted he come over for a home-cooked dinner. Sam couldn't help but laugh. The widow Brooks wasn't naive, nor was she frightened of him. She seemed to understand exactly what he had done and why, and she wanted to see him anyway. The evening was a lively, chaotic affair as Caroline's 2 children warmed up to their new Uncle Sam. Initially, they were wary of him, intimidated by his towering height and unfamiliar presence. Their confusion lingered as they tried to understand why their father was gone. Caroline's hesitant explanation, that he was in heaven, lacked conviction, leaving them puzzled and unsure. Realizing his stature was part of the issue, Sam dropped to the floor to their level. The kids, Charlie and Nancy, Both inheriting their mother's coloring, were thrilled to suddenly loom over him. Before long, they were climbing all over him, their fear dissipating with every giggle. By the time he stood up, they were completely at ease. After dinner, Sam joined Caroline to drop the kids off at Mrs. Jones's house for a sleepover. On the way back, he jokingly asked if he'd be having a sleepover too. Caroline shot him a teasing smirk, her humor sharp as ever. She warned him to behave lest he find himself promptly escorted back to his car, banned from returning. Back at her house, Caroline made a half-joking confession about her nervousness. She mentioned hearing a rumor that the bogeyman who took Trevor might be nearby. When Sam asked where she'd heard that, she smirked and admitted it was from the voices in her head. They laughed, but the undertone of truth was clear. Trevor's absence still loomed large. Months later, Caroline posed a direct question. When was Sam planning to propose? Her casual demeanor couldn't disguise the weight of the inquiry. Sam, however, grew serious, voicing concerns about the scrutiny their marriage might attract from detectives. Caroline dismissed the worries confidently, assuring him that no evidence could ever tie him to Trevor's death. They had never openly discussed what had happened, but her implicit understanding of the situation was evident. Sam hesitated, asking if she could ever feel completely safe with him, if there would always be a part of her that feared him. Caroline cupped his face and looked directly into his eyes. With conviction, she reassured him that she trusted him entirely, believed in his moral compass, and would never be afraid of him. Her confidence extended to her children, whom she believed would feel just as safe with him. Sam, deeply moved, tried to address her lingering trust issues after Trevor, but she interrupted, reminding him that he had already placed his trust, and potentially his freedom, in her hands. That act of trust, coupled with her love for him, erased any doubts she had. Caroline pressed him again, playfully demanding a proper proposal. Sam, caught up in her charm, knelt down on one knee. She laughed, warning him that a proposal wouldn't count without a ring. Sam pretended to fumble through his pockets before producing one, its delicate band dwarfed in his large hand. Caroline inspected it skeptically, jokingly accusing him of recycling Dylan's old ring. Sam assured her it was new, humorously claiming he'd chosen it over a basket of tomatoes at a roadside stand. Caroline gave in, throwing herself into his arms with a joyful squeal. Sam held her tightly, marveling at how far they had come. When she teased him about whether this was just his way of repaying her for saving her from Alistair, she grinned, hinting that her gratitude would come later. As expected, their marriage stirred the waters. Investigators revisited Trevor's case, retracing old leads. The renewed interest was short-lived, though, and the case was soon shelved indefinitely. Detective Sergeant Bishop visited Sam one last time, his tone heavier than before. Over a quiet conversation on the patio, Bishop revealed a personal connection to the case. Trevor had victimized his daughter-in-law, Rebecca. She and Bishop's son, Charlie, had been part of Sam and Caroline's high school class, a reminder of Trevor's predatory nature. Bishop recounted Rebecca's difficult experience, detailing how Trevor had taken advantage of her vulnerability as a police officer's wife. He had coerced her into an inappropriate relationship and used compromising photos to control her. To make matters even harder, Trevor's actions had drawn others into the situation, intensifying her distress. Bishop's voice trembled with a mix of anger and sorrow as he explained how his family was striving to heal, seeking support through counseling and working to rebuild their lives. Sam listened, his respect for Bishop deepening. He recognized the devastation Trevor had caused, not just to his own life, but to countless others. As the conversation ended, Sam couldn't help but reflect on how far he and Caroline had come, and the strength they'd need to face the future together. Warren sat silently for a moment, his eyes fixed on his tightly clenched fists. The weight of his words seemed almost too heavy to voice, but eventually, he began. Charlie came home after his shift to find Rebecca on the bathroom floor. Her wrists were slashed. It was right after one of those nights. His voice cracked, but he forced himself to continue. They saved her with a transfusion, physically at least. But mentally, she was gone, somewhere far away. We didn't know how bad things were until that anonymous tip came through. Once Trevor's body was discovered, we started digging deeper. But Rebecca, she wouldn't tell us anything. Letting out a deep sigh, Warren shook his head. Trevor had a habit of running his mouth, he said bitterly. And when we leaned on his accomplices, they gave up everything. Sam listened quietly, absorbing every word as Warren laid out the grim details. After Charlie told Rebecca that Trevor was dead, it was like a switch flipped. She started responding to treatment, slowly, but she's coming back. A few days ago, we sent Charlie out of town on a case, just to keep him away while we made our move. While he was gone, we arrested the two other men involved. If Charlie had known, I'm sure he'd have gone after them himself, tool in hand. That's not something we could allow. Warren's expression hardened briefly before a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. Those two are facing more charges than they'll know what to do with. The evidence is solid. They'll be locked away for a long time. And Rebecca? She's healing. The doctors think she'll be ready to come home soon. Sam gave a slight nod, his voice calm but sincere. That's good to hear, Warren. For her and for Charlie, they deserve that. Warren hesitated, his tone softening as he added, There's something else I need to tell you. Charlie wants to reach out to you, but he's ashamed. He was one of the kids who jumped you back in high school, that fight that got you suspended. It's been eating at him, especially now, knowing everything you've done. A faint smile crossed Sam's lips. That's all in the past. What matters is the man he is today. If he wants to talk, I'd be happy to see him. And Rebecca too, when she's ready. Warren stood, signaling the end of their conversation, but he lingered for a moment. I thought you'd like to know that the case is officially closed. You don't have to worry about it resurfacing. As long as I have a say, it's staying that way. He extended a hand and Sam shook it firmly. Thanks, Warren, Sam said, his voice steady. Warren gave a faint nod, his words final but sincere. No, Sam, thank you. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Sam to process the quiet resolve of the moment. As a child, my world was a patchwork of fleeting dreams and small-town simplicity. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood where the nights were blanketed in the hum of crickets and the occasional bark of a restless dog. My parents worked tirelessly to give me opportunities they never had, a lesson in perseverance and sacrifice etched into the fabric of my youth. Summers were spent on dusty ball fields, winters by the fireplace, and every season between filled with whispered hopes of a future larger than this sleepy town could contain. By the time I reached adulthood, I had learned to channel those childhood dreams into determination. College offered me a gateway to the world, but it also brought the clarity that success would not come easy. I juggled part-time jobs while navigating coursework that felt endless. Yet through it all, the memories of my parents' relentless spirit kept me grounded. Meeting Molly during those years felt like destiny. She was the one who seemed to see beyond my ambitions to the person I was trying to become. For weeks, I had been brushing off the weight loss and constant nausea. I figured it was the flu, or maybe something I ate, nothing serious. But when Dr. Bartle called me in, his tone made it clear this wasn't going to be a quick fix. I'd known him for 15 years, long enough to sense when something was wrong. As I sat in his office, I felt a knot in my stomach tighten. Pancreatic cancer, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm so sorry, Gordon. I stared at him, the words not registering. Cancer? No, that wasn't possible. I didn't feel like someone who had cancer. I felt tired, sure, but not terminal. My mind raced for alternatives. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I just needed some vitamins or a better diet. But the way he looked at me told me there was no mistake. How long? I finally asked, my voice barely audible. 6 months, maybe, he said. We can focus on palliative care to make things as comfortable as possible. 6 months. The words echoed in my head, hollow and surreal. I thought of Molly, of our kids, of all the plans we'd made for retirement, the trips, the quiet mornings together. It felt like a curtain had been pulled back on my life, revealing just how fragile it all was. I left the office, my feet carrying me out to the car, while my mind spun in circles. I couldn't go home, not yet. I wasn't ready to face Molly, to tell her that I was dying. I drove aimlessly, trying to make sense of what had just happened, until I ended up at the parking lot of the Embassy Suites Hotel. It wasn't intentional. I just needed to stop somewhere. That's when I saw it. Molly's Jaguar. The vanity plate was unmistakable. Parked next to it was a familiar Audi with the license plate, Spine Dock. My chest tightened as I realized it belonged to Arnold Frost. Arnold had been Molly's college sweetheart. They were engaged once, long before she met me. He'd moved back to town about a year ago, and now here he was, parked next to my wife's car outside a hotel. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe they'd run into each other by chance. Maybe this was just a lunch meeting. But deep down, I knew better. I parked far enough away to stay hidden and watched. A few minutes later, Molly came out of the hotel with Arnold. She kissed him, casually like it was second nature, and then got into her car and drove off. I just sat there, numb. There was no explosion of anger, no sobbing or shouting. It was too much to process all at once. My wife, my partner of more than half my life, had just destroyed me. First cancer, now this. I leaned back in my seat, feeling hollow. Eventually, I checked into the hotel. I couldn't go home, not yet. I needed time to think, to sort through the mess that had become my life in the span of a single day. I tried to sleep but woke up hours later, drenched in sweat. My body felt stiff, my mind heavy. I thought about Molly, about how I'd confront her, but the words never came together. I needed to hear a voice I could trust, someone who still loved me without conditions. So I called my daughter, Amber. We talked for nearly an hour, about nothing in particular, just her life, her work, memories of better times. Toward the end, she asked if I was okay. Her voice was so full of concern that I almost broke down right there, but I managed to reassure her with a lie. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd lose. No grandchildren to spoil, no quiet mornings with Molly, no chance to see how the rest of my life would unfold. I thought about calling my son, but couldn't muster the strength. Instead, I curled up on the bed, still dressed, and let exhaustion take me. That night, I realized that life as I knew it was already over. What came next? I didn't know. All I knew was that everything I'd built, everything I'd counted on, had crumbled in a single devastating day. Around 10 p.m., I woke up, thirsty and disoriented. I drank the water left over from my earlier meal and sent Molly a quick text. Had to leave town for work. Macmillan's business is at risk of shutting down. No cell reception where I'm headed, back in a few days. I checked my phone for any messages from her. There were none. Not a call, not a text. If I'd been in an accident, she wouldn't have known or cared. Resigned, I flipped on ESPN for a bit before going back to bed. At 1 a.m., I woke up feeling oddly rested and unexpectedly hungry. For the first time in weeks, I had an appetite. I ordered breakfast, scrambled eggs, bacon, pancakes, and orange juice, and retrieved my laptop from the car. As I ate, I began organizing my thoughts into lists. The first thing I addressed was Riley's Ally, the company that had been in my family for 3 generations. My mother, Sheila Riley, had managed its merger with Allied Financial before her tragic death in a car accident. That merger turned our business into a financial powerhouse, and when she died, I stepped into her role. My wife, Molly, had no connection to the business. Her name wasn't on the paperwork, and she held no stake in it. Looking back, I saw how things had shifted in our lives after the merger. Molly had always been a loving wife and mother, even giving up a promising career to focus on raising our kids. But as our wealth grew, so did her appetite for luxury. At first, the upgrades seemed reasonable. A better school district, a larger car for the family. But the excess soon followed. Extravagant furniture, expensive landscaping, and trips we didn't need. Still, Molly had been an incredible mother. She made sacrifices for the kids without complaint, prioritizing their needs above her own. But as the years went by, something changed. She grew more distant, withdrawing from family life and treating time with us as an obligation. I'd made excuses for her, even tried to bridge the gap with vacations and outings. But her absence became glaring. I wondered what she'd been doing all those times she claimed to be busy. After what I saw at the hotel, I had my answer. As I finished my breakfast, I turned my attention to the future. It was clear what I needed to do. First, I'd have the company professionally valued and put it up for sale. Then, I'd sell the house and liquidate every valuable asset. Molly wouldn't see a dime. Everything I owned would be set aside for my children or donated. I started drafting my plan and picked up the phone to make calls. First, I reached out to Craig, an old golf buddy with deep ties in the financial world. Craig had helped a mutual friend, Scott Billings, sell his brokerage firm during a contentious divorce. If anyone could connect me with the right people, it was him. Craig, it's Gordon. I need a favor. Can you recommend a good firm for valuing a business? And if you've kept in touch with Scott, I'd like the contact information for the people he used. Craig promised to get back to me by the end of the day, and I moved on to my next call. This one was to my doctor. I needed clarity on what to expect as my condition worsened. He provided names of specialists and urged me to prioritize appointments. His concern struck me. It was far more than I'd received from Molly, who still hadn't acknowledged my absence. Finally, I called Carla, my secretary. I instructed her to handle office matters in my absence and assured her I'd check in the next day with details about the auditors. Call me if anything comes up, I said, though I knew I wouldn't be back in the office anytime soon. By the time I hung up, the outlines of my plan were taking shape. My days were numbered, but I'd use the time I had left to protect what mattered most, my kids, my legacy, and my dignity. As for Molly, She'd have to face the consequences of her choices without me. Running a business like mine demanded reliable security. While the internal team managed routine tasks, they weren't equipped for deeper investigative work. For more complex matters, I relied on an outside security firm known for its expertise in surveillance, background checks, and sensitive cases. I wasn't interested in building a legal case for divorce. What was the point with only 6 months to live? Instead, I needed solid evidence of my wife's actions, primarily for my children. They deserved the truth, so I wouldn't be cast as the villain after I was gone. Uncharacteristically, I decided to meet with the firm in person. Normally, a phone call would have sufficed, especially since I had the CEO's direct number. But something about the situation demanded a physical presence, perhaps a need to reclaim some control. When I arrived at their office, I introduced myself and requested a meeting with Avery Beastel. Despite not having an appointment, he came down promptly and led me into a sleek, modern conference room. I explained the situation plainly. I needed a thorough investigation into my wife's activities, evidence of her current affair, and any past indiscretions. Although Avery maintained a professional demeanor, it was clear he hadn't expected such a direct request. Still, he assured me that his team could handle the matter discreetly and effectively. I signed the necessary authorizations, documents that seemed to encompass an entire forest's worth of paper. Everything was included: surveillance on the cars and house, financial investigations, and even a plan to pressure local hotels for records if needed. I emphasized the urgency, instructing him to prioritize the case and involve additional resources if required. After leaving the office, I received a call from Craig, an old friend and trusted contact. He had found a lead for evaluating my company, Marquette Financial Services, run by Maddie Albright. Known for their meticulous work, Marquette was the perfect choice. Craig had already arranged a meeting for that afternoon, and I made my way to their office. Maddie Albright radiated competence and professionalism. Her office reflected her focus, with framed photos of her family, a husband and 2 children, neatly displayed. We discussed the process of valuing my company, and after signing another stack of authorizations, she assured me her team would begin immediately. When I pressed for speed, she made it clear that while efficiency was possible, quality would not be compromised. Her honesty only strengthened my confidence in her. The day felt productive, but as I drove back to the hotel, my thoughts circled back to the heavy realities I was confronting. My life was finite, with no control over the looming end. But Molly's actions, her betrayal, were something I could manage. In shaping that narrative, I found a strange sense of purpose. Back at the hotel, I leaned against the headboard and made another call. The Veterans Clinic's automated system eventually connected me to Marlene, the receptionist for DACAM. Over the years, I'd grown familiar with her polite but formal tone. She arranged for me to meet ECAM later that evening, not at his office, but over dinner at a local bar and grill. By the time I arrived, ECAM stood out easily. His presence, marked by his distinct Sikh identity, was steadying in its familiarity. As he joined me at the table, the waitress brought over water and chips. For the first time that day, the weight of my decisions felt lighter. Sharing the burden, even in small ways, made all the difference. I sat at the restaurant table, scanning the menu absently, though my mind was elsewhere. The waitress approached with a cheerful, "Ready to order?" I smiled faintly at the irony. Ready? I needed 6 months, maybe a few years, not a menu. She was young, probably a college student, and seemed unaware of the storm in my head. I ordered beers, Uncle Jacob's stout for me, and an O'Doul's for my friend Ikam, along with 2 bowls of chile verde, 1 vegetarian, and garlic bread. She took the order and left. Ikam, a psychiatrist and an old friend from my service days, studied me with curiosity, his chin resting on his hands. He knew me too well to miss the tension. The restaurant, filled with young couples and families, only amplified the sense that I was out of place, a relic in someone else's vibrant world. When his probing gaze lingered, I finally broke. I recounted everything: the cancer diagnosis, Molly's betrayal, the numbness that had overtaken me, and the strange clarity I'd woken up with that morning. I explained my decision to dismantle her life as methodically as she dismantled my trust. It wasn't revenge for the sake of it. It was a final act of control in a life that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Ikam listened without judgment, his sympathy clear. He reminded me I didn't deserve any of this and urged me to focus on the future, whatever time I had left. Before we parted, he invited me to a fair at the Veterans Clinic that weekend. It seemed small, but the thought of camaraderie gave me something to look forward to. That evening, Molly finally reached out for the first time in 2 days, asking when I'd return. Her timing and detachment made it clear she was only checking to see how much freedom she had left for her affair. I ignored the message and instead called my secretary, Carla, to request access to a file on my computer, a compilation of buyout offers for my company. The file contained years of research, company profiles, and evaluations. With my time running out, I decided to liquidate the business. For the next few hours, I reviewed the data, confirming its accuracy and drafting letters to potential buyers. Each letter included information about the firm I'd hired for the evaluation, Maddie Albright's company, ensuring the process was thorough and professional. By the time the letters were sent, I had put into motion one of the final steps in unraveling the life Molly and I had built together. I also contacted my doctor to confirm the details for palliative care specialists, but insisted that Molly remain completely in the dark about my condition. He tried to argue, claiming secrecy was a mistake, but I made it clear my diagnosis was mine alone to control. By Saturday, most of my assets had been liquidated. The cars, the house, the business, even an apartment in Honolulu were all accounted for. I sent Molly a curt message saying I'd return Wednesday. Her response, a simple "okay," was as empty as our marriage had become. I dressed casually and headed to the Veterans Clinic to meet Ekam. Half the parking lot was taken up by a vibrant festival honoring veterans. There were food vendors, live music, and booths offering services and resources for those who had served. As I wandered through the crowd, I grabbed a mango lassi from a food truck and tipped generously. The Poplin Family Jug Band played in the background, their cheerful tunes a strange contrast to my somber thoughts. One vendor, Mookie's House of Tacos, caught my eye with its quirky signage. A giant notice declared they didn't sell Dr. Pepper, while a smaller menu detailed their tacos and salsas. Mookie himself handed out brown paper bags with a warm smile, occasionally hugging those who stopped by. The festival was lively, filled with energy and camaraderie, but it only underscored how isolated I felt. As I stood there, sipping my drink, and watching the scene unfold, I realized how much I'd come to depend on these small moments of connection. Brief respites in a world that was rapidly unraveling. For now, they would have to be enough. At the Veterans Fair, Ekam explained Mookie's reputation. Mookie was known for giving free cannabis to veterans and the elderly, claiming it was a super strain. While that claim was as common in Colorado as craft breweries, Mookie's generosity set him apart. After sampling his tacos, I bought 6, 2 chicken, 1 carnitas for me, and 2 sofritas and a bean taco for Ekam. I added a few jars of his hemp salsa and left a generous tip, rationalizing it as part of the fortune I'd soon have to shed. As I headed toward the building, a voice called my name. Turning, I saw Scott Billings jogging toward me. He looked better than I'd expected, considering the rumors of his post-divorce struggles. We exchanged pleasantries, and he mentioned he'd recently moved back to town to be near his niece and nephew. When the conversation shifted to work, I admitted I was selling my business, and he offered to meet for lunch and share insights from his own experience. Scott's presence reminded me of his ex-wife, Nancy, a former LPGA star. Curious, I made a mental note to look her up later. After parting ways, I returned to Ekam, who was visibly pleased to see the tacos. Over the next 2 hours, we delved into topics I rarely discussed with anyone else, our conversation drifting from life's complexities to the challenges I faced. Ekam, ever the psychiatrist, eventually addressed the elephant in the room, Molly's betrayal. He suggested that I give her a chance to change, to acknowledge her actions and return to the family. He believed reconciliation was possible, that I had nothing to lose by trying. But the idea of sharing my final months with a woman whose betrayal had gutted me was unbearable. I told him plainly that I couldn't do it. The thought of waking up each day beside someone who had shattered my trust, knowing she'd only stayed out of pity or guilt, felt like a slow death. I was resolved to dismantle the life we'd built and leave her to face the ruins. Ekam, though disapproving, understood my anger, even as he cautioned me against letting hatred consume my final days. He urged me to find peace and approach Molly with honesty about both my diagnosis and her infidelity. We both knew I wasn't going to take his advice. Instead, I shifted the focus to my children. How could I prepare them for what was coming? We discussed ways to broach the subject, balancing honesty with sensitivity. By the time I left, the sun had set, and I was emotionally drained. Back at the hotel, I ordered drinks to my room and made a call I had been avoiding. I dialed my son, William, who picked up with his usual cheerfulness. I told him I needed to meet him and his sister the following weekend, assuring him it was about business, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. His concern was palpable as he reminded me I could always call to talk. His words lingered after we hung up, a bittersweet reminder of the love and strength I still had in my children. That night I lay awake, replaying the conversation and steeling myself for what lay ahead. The weight of what I needed to say, to Molly, to my children, felt crushing. But as much as the future terrified me, I knew I couldn't delay much longer. Time was running out. After ending the call with William, I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories of his fearless childhood came rushing back. His wild bike rides, the skateboarding tricks that made my heart stop, and the endless trips to skate parks where I insisted he wear helmets and pads. I would have wrapped him in bubble wrap if I could. Now he was grown, independent, and someone I deeply admired. Lost in self-reflection, I decided to make something meaningful for him and his sister. Videos offering life advice for moments I wouldn't be there to guide them through. I planned topics like recognizing true love, overcoming marriage hurdles, and the shock of discovering you're about to be a parent. My focus had narrowed to my children and a few close friends, and with less than 6 months left, I intended to use my time wisely. I toyed with the idea of setting up an irrevocable trust for the kids, untouchable by Molly. If that didn't work, I'd buy gold and arrange for them to receive it in a few years. The anger simmered inside me, but it wasn't helping. I opened the investigator's daily photo summary emails, something I'd avoided until then. The reports were clinical, detached, but the attached pictures struck a raw nerve. They revealed a life I didn't recognize, a sense of loss so profound it hollowed me out. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears rolled down my cheeks. Exhausted, I stripped down to my underwear, crawled into bed, and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, though not as energized as previous days, I was determined. I had a plan. Sitting at my laptop, I brainstormed ideas for a project that would reflect kindness and simplicity. After sifting through dozens of possibilities, I landed on something lighthearted and universal: hugs. A message about their value felt fitting, uplifting, and easy to scale. The University of Colorado had a strong arts program, so I headed to campus to find freelance graphic artists. Wandering through bulletin boards across campus, I snapped photos of 7 ads from students advertising their services. Feeling accomplished, I stopped at a sandwich shop. Without fully reading the menu, I ordered a turkey and avocado wrap with bacon, tomato, and extra mayo. The cashier joked, "Your funeral?" And for the first time in days, I laughed. "That's not what's going to liquidate me," I said, amused by the irony. After grabbing my food, I left a generous tip and found a bench to eat while drafting my pitch. My email to the students was straightforward. I explained the project: a collage of people hugging, older adults embracing younger ones, athletes hugging disabled individuals, bikers and hippies, men and women in every combination. The tagline would read, "Nothing free gives so much to another person. Give it as a gift today." The design had to be scalable and suitable for a billboard. By the time I contacted an ad agency for billboard space, 5 of the students had already responded with quotes. I quickly agreed to their rates and secured 3 billboard locations in my target neighborhood, negotiating for reasonable turnaround times. The final 2 offers arrived shortly after, and I accepted them as well. The next day, I received 6 sample designs. I approved them all, paying the students 50% more than they'd asked. It wasn't charity, I just didn't have a reason to hold on to the money. The designs I liked best earned their creators an additional commission for a second project. 2 days later, I sat in my car in a parking lot, munching on a chocolate chip cookie and sipping cold milk. The nostalgia for childhood comfort foods hit hard. My billboard was installed within hours, a vibrant display of hugs and the cheerful tagline. Watching the team work, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. As they finished, I stepped out of the car and approached one of the workers. Watching the crew finish the billboard installation, I was struck by how quickly they worked. I'd assumed installing something like that would be a lengthy project, but the wiry man leading the team explained it came in pre-assembled strips. After some back and forth, I struck a deal: $2,000 per worker and $2,500 for him if they agreed to help with future projects. I paid extra to have everything ready within 24 hours. Meanwhile, Molly texted twice, letting me know she was home and asking where I was. I ignored her. If she involved the kids and they called, I'd have to explain over the phone what I planned to say in person. Her lack of concern worked in my favor. 48 hours later, the new billboard went up 3 blocks from Arnold Frost's office. It displayed a photo of him kissing Molly, accompanied by the caption, "Dr. Arnold Frost is my wife's chiropractor. He treats more than just her back." The ad agency assured me it couldn't be traced back to me, but I didn't care. Knowing I was dying made me fearless. The fallout came quickly. By lunchtime, the agency called to report a problem with the billboard. Playing the outraged client, I demanded immediate action. They promised to remove the image that evening and restore the original in 2 days. I repeated the stunt at another location near Frost's office. After the third billboard, the agency terminated my contract. The story spread across social media and even hit local news, driving traffic to a website I'd set up for the stunt. Molly bombarded me with calls and messages, acting as though she cared, but I ignored her. The house she'd insisted we needed, an ostentatious mansion in the best neighborhood, had been a gift from my parents, sold to me for next to nothing. I had taken out a massive mortgage on it, knowing full well what I was doing. Liquidating assets and cutting ties wasn't just petty, it was strategic. Friday evening, I met Scott Billings for dinner. He was a colleague in the same field, and I hoped to get his perspective on selling my company. He surprised me by bringing his girlfriend, Liz Armaguido, a high-powered lawyer with a reputation for being unrelenting. Scott also surprised me with a hug. We'd never been close enough for gestures like that. As we ate, Scott broached the subject everyone in town seemed to know about, the billboards. He asked if I was seeing anyone for support, hinting that I should. I admitted I hadn't, though I appreciated his concern. Then he introduced me to Liz, who wasted no time addressing the chaos I'd created. Liz explained that Frost was now facing ethical charges, losing patients, and being pushed out of his practice. She predicted he'd try to sue me but seemed unconcerned. Offering to help, she laid out her terms. I'd cover her expenses, but she wouldn't charge a fee. She even offered to investigate Frost further, confident she could uncover more dirt. When I asked why she was willing to help a stranger, Liz dropped her smile and admitted to past regrets about not stepping in to help someone close to her. She didn't want to make the same mistake twice. Besides, she said, Frost was a scumbag, and taking him down was its own reward. Her honesty caught me off guard, but I accepted the offer. In a matter of days, I'd not only created chaos in Frost's life, but also found allies willing to stand by me. While I wasn't sure where this road would lead, one thing was certain. I wasn't done yet. That evening, I finally opened up to Scott and Liz about my diagnosis. Liz mentioned her brother-in-law's aunt, a private nurse and dietitian, and promised to share her contact information. We didn't delve into the grim reality that I'd eventually need round-the-clock care, but the thought lingered. The next morning, I made the hour-long drive to my daughter Amber's house. She had moved closer last year, something that now felt like an incredible blessing. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw William's car already there. Sitting in my car, I tried to gather the strength to face them. I dreaded hurting my children, but knew I had no choice. They had to know both the truth about my health and about Molly. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my laptop and went inside. Amber and William were waiting, their expressions somber. After hugging them tightly, I sat them down and began, stumbling through an apology for having to burden them with this. I told them about Molly's infidelity first, starting with the basics. She was seeing a man she dated before our marriage, a chiropractor who had recently moved back to town. Their initial reactions wavered between disbelief and denial. I showed them the investigators' reports, and Amber insisted on seeing the photos. William refused, but watched her face as she scrolled through the images. When tears rolled down her cheeks, the reality hit both of them hard. I hugged Amber as she cried, and then braced myself for the next revelation. "There's more," I began, trying to steady my voice. "I didn't want to do this all at once, but I don't have a choice. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have about 6 months." Their grief over Molly was quickly overshadowed by the devastating news about my health. They reacted as I had, refusing to accept it, clinging to the hope of a mistake, a second opinion, or a miracle treatment. Drawing on ECAM's advice, I remained calm and let them process everything. They threw out suggestions, desperate for a solution, but I gently redirected the conversation, reminding them to take time to absorb it all. William seemed especially shaken, struggling to express himself. While Amber was likely to confront Molly directly, I knew William would withdraw, bottling his emotions as he always had. Later, he disappeared onto the porch with a beer, staring into the distance. When he returned, his eyes were red, and he silently hugged me and Amber before retreating for another drink. In that moment, I realized he had effectively lost both parents in one day. Wanting to salvage some sense of normalcy, I suggested we go out for dinner at the best restaurant in Colorado Springs. Amber agreed to find a place, and I planned to stay in her guest room for the night. I asked them not to mention my visit to Molly and joked they could look up the Billboard chiropractor online for some added context. They nodded, managing faint smiles, and I drifted into an exhausted sleep. When Amber woke me hours later, her hand on my cheek, she looked worried. I felt feverish and groggy, brushing off her concerns with a half-mumbled suggestion to postpone dinner. She offered to take me to the hospital, but I reassured her it was nothing more than fatigue. William sat silently in a chair nearby, watching me, his concern evident. Amber kissed my forehead, her tears returning as she whispered, "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart," I murmured before drifting off again. The burst of energy I'd been riding for days was gone, replaced by an overwhelming weariness. My resolve to make the most of my time hadn't wavered, but the toll of my circumstances was becoming harder to ignore. I woke up drained, but determined not to let it show in front of Amber and William. We had breakfast together at the cafeteria, where I made 2 trips through the line but barely touched my food. Despite feeling physically worse, emotionally I was buoyed by their presence. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. I was leaning on them too much, drawing strength from their energy while watching it take a toll on them. Later, I took my laptop and coffee onto Amber's porch, knowing I couldn't put off dealing with my broader circle any longer. Since discovering Molly's betrayal, I'd withdrawn from nearly everyone except my kids and immediate business matters. My inbox overflowed with 274 unread emails, even after the spam filter. I deleted all of Molly's messages, 23 in total, and finally blocked her address. It was petty, but it felt satisfying. I crafted a brief response to send to distant relatives and acquaintances. It explained Molly's affair, confirmed I had evidence, and shared my diagnosis. I assured them their care was appreciated, but emphasized that my remaining time would be devoted to Amber and William. For close friends, I took more care, answering specific questions. The process took hours, but by the end, I felt a sense of closure. That evening, we went to one of the best restaurants in Colorado Springs. There were laughs, good food, and inevitable quiet moments of reflection. William flew home on Monday, while I stayed with Amber a few more days to finalize plans for a new chapter. I found and signed a lease on a small apartment and moved in the following weekend. Meanwhile, Liz had evidently shaken Frost and his lawyers. Their threats stopped, and I never heard from them again. She also introduced me to her brother-in-law's aunt, Beth, a private nurse with decades of experience. I hired her on the spot, trusting her preparation and expertise. By then, the sale of my company was finalized, and I'd secured a mortgage for the house. Life settled into a rhythm. I flew to visit William weekly, staying a day or two at his place, and he'd return the favor by flying to Pueblo. I reconnected with friends, had a few lunches with Liz and Scott, and even attended a Poplin family jug band concert. The days were filled with visits from relatives and old friends who came to say goodbye, though no one ever said it aloud. There were tears, hugs, and promises to look after my kids. As my health declined, I leaned heavily on Amber, William, and Ecom, my psychiatrist friend. They were my anchors. Molly, however, was shut out completely. I changed my phone number, ensured my children wouldn't share my contact information with her, and even hired a private investigator when I suspected she might retaliate. She appeared at my favorite bookstore and restaurants, but never seemed to notice me. Ecam eventually confronted me about Molly. He revealed that she had been to his office multiple times, even showing up at his home, desperate and broken. He referred her to a colleague, worried about her mental health. "You've succeeded in punishing her, Gordon," he said bluntly. "She's a wreck. I'm concerned about her well-being." I offered a detached apology, but didn't waver in my position. "I don't want you dragged into this, and I'm not going to see her." Ecom pressed further. "What about for your kids? They'll still have their mother when you're gone, whether you like it or not. If reconciling even slightly could help them, wouldn't it be worth considering?" He was right, and we both knew it. His words struck a chord, but I wasn't ready to admit it. "I'll think about it," I said finally with a reluctant smile. "For the kids." Eckham shrugged and smiled. "That's all I ask." Although I had prepaid Beth for a year of services, I refused to rely on her until absolutely necessary. Clinging to my independence, I resisted the inevitable loss of normalcy, even as worsening pain and higher medication doses made driving nearly impossible. Eventually, Beth became my driver. One evening, she dropped me off at La Fourchetta de Massy for dinner with Amber and William before heading off to shop for her grandnephews. She adored them and spoke of them often. A teenage violin prodigy, Shannon, and 2 younger boys, one a toddler, the other just a baby. By the time I reached the table, my children were already seated. We enjoyed a pleasant meal, talking about their careers and lives. As dessert arrived, I broached a difficult topic. Does my lack of contact with your mother make things harder for you? I asked. Amber set her fork down and replied evenly. Not really. She calls once a week, but I hang up if she mentions you. She doesn't try often. William, preoccupied with his dessert, shrugged after a pause. Doesn't matter to me. I haven't talked to her, and I don't plan to. She can't stalk or pressure me anymore. Is she still stalking you? I pressed. He nodded. I had to switch parishes. She hasn't been to church in years, but she showed up last week. A wave of emotional exhaustion swept over me. As parents, Molly and I were supposed to lighten our children's burdens, not add to them. I sighed. When I'm gone, will it be hard for you to move forward with her? Would it help if I contacted her again? Amber didn't hesitate. No, Dad, if we're going to rebuild any relationship, it'll take time. That's not happening in the next few months. William leaned forward, pushing his plate aside. I can't believe that selfish woman is my mother. You're dying, and she still makes it about herself. Forget her. Furious, he threw cash on the table to cover the bill and stormed outside. We found him sitting by the pond outside the restaurant, staring at the water. Are you okay? I asked gently. Startled, he looked up. Yeah, just upset. She abandoned us, and now she wants to swoop back in before it's too late. It's always about her. Beth returned to pick me up. I hugged Amber and William goodbye and climbed into the car, her nurse's intuition picking up on my weariness. You look pale. Are you all right? Physically, not bad, I replied. Thanks, Beth. Over the next few weeks, I focused on securing my children's futures. I paid off their debts, bought William a house near his condo, and purchased Amber an investment property. I established education funds for my future grandchildren and cleared the loans for Ecom's children. Visualizing my financial efforts like a telethon marker, I worked relentlessly to spend every dollar to ensure Molly would be left with nothing. Within 60 days, I finalized the sale of my company. Employees received generous bonuses, and the agreement guaranteed their jobs for 2 years. I remained an absentee owner, letting the team handle operations. By the 3rd month, Beth moved in, taking charge of my care as I sought palliative support, refusing treatments that would prolong my life at the expense of my remaining quality time. Occasionally, Beth claimed she needed to babysit her grandnephews. I knew it was an excuse. She could see how much their visits brightened my spirits. One afternoon, Ethan, the older boy, brought a toy dump truck and we played on the floor for hours. He bossed me around sweetly, making sure I filled the truck when instructed. His younger brother, too small for cookies, watched as Ethan insisted I share 3 with him before he would eat his own. The joy they brought reminded me of William's childhood, filling the apartment with warmth and laughter. Even as my strength waned, moments like these reminded me that I could still find light in the time I had left. The following week, William excitedly shared news about a new addition to his family, a dog they named Captain Thor. Ethan explained that the boys couldn't settle on a favorite superhero, so they combined names. More likely, Ethan just liked the sound of Captain Thor, which admittedly had a certain charm. A few days later, I spoke to Amber about getting a dog. I'd already found one named Sparky, though the boys had suggested the name Iron Hulk. Sparky seemed like a better fit. He was from a rescue, not a purebred litter as I initially joked, but he was intelligent, affectionate, and irresistible. I sent Amber a video of Sparky performing simple tricks, confident she'd fall in love with him just as I had. She planned to meet him the next day, and it was clear she was already smitten. Sparky quickly became part of my routine, though Beth handled much of his care, taking him for walks and cleaning up after him. He brought an undeniable warmth to the house. Each night, Sparky would sneak onto my pillow, staring at me until I woke. This led to an immediate purchase of halitosis treats, but his companionship made it worthwhile. Amber adored Sparky, and if not for my firm protests, might have taken him home. Even as these small joys lifted my spirits, the complexities of my situation weighed heavily. I felt a mix of sadness, fear, and an odd sense of peace. Ecam played a crucial role in that equilibrium, often standing by me during difficult moments. When we visited a priest, I half expected him to steer the conversation toward forgiveness, but he didn't. Instead, he simply remained present, a true friend when I needed it most. Music offered another kind of solace. Shannon Poplin's classical violin performances became a source of profound comfort. Attending her concerts with Beth, I often closed my eyes and let the music carry me away from pain and fear. Shannon and her father frequently performed for charity, donating any honorariums to causes like the Greater Pueblo Wish Fulfillment Foundation. One day, when Beth brought her grandnephews for a visit, I asked her to invite Shannon as well. While the boys played, I spoke privately with Shannon. I expressed my admiration for her work and the impact her music had on me. Her performances, I told her, made my fears disappear and replaced them with a sense of peace. I asked if she would consider playing at my funeral and memorial service, offering a $150,000 donation to Make-A-Wish in her honor. Shannon, shy but moved, agreed, her emotions spilling over into tears. As she composed herself, Sparky did his best to cheer her up, curling up next to her on the couch and trying to lick her face. Later, as her father came to pick up the boys, Shannon hugged me tightly, her gratitude unspoken but deeply felt. Beth watched from across the room, her expression one of quiet understanding. These moments, however fleeting, reminded me that even in the midst of uncertainty and pain, there was beauty to be found in connection, kindness, and shared humanity. The acknowledgement I received for supporting Shannon left me uneasy. While I appreciated the gratitude, I was never comfortable with praise. Shannon often heard compliments about her talent, but this time was different. It resonated with her. She understood the gravity of what I'd asked and the emotional depth behind my words. Beth later explained that Shannon and Ethan frequently connected with veterans, making her empathetic beyond her years. Though performing for the grieving might not be something she enjoyed, Shannon grasped its significance. The impact I'd made on her was clear, but I brushed it off, uncomfortable with being placed on a pedestal. Meanwhile, I continued managing my affairs. I had set up a college fund for Shannon and her brothers and created an annuity for Beth, ensuring she'd be taken care of after I was gone. However, despite my efforts to spend and redistribute my assets, the sale of the company caused my finances to grow instead of deplete. My focus shifted to ensuring Molly would have no access to anything I left behind. I knew Ecom would disapprove, though his judgment only existed in my mind. Still, I was resolute. She would receive nothing. Frost could shoulder her materialistic lifestyle if he wanted. After consulting with financial experts, I devised an intricate plan. I enlisted multiple law firms in London, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, each tasked with securing specific assets for my children years after my death. Gold coins, artwork, and stamp collections were distributed among them, ensuring my kids could sell or keep these valuables as they saw fit. Though the process eroded a portion of my wealth, I didn't care. If it worked, my children would be secure for life. If Molly somehow found a loophole, I joked to myself that I'd return to haunt her. Most of the mutual friends Molly and I had as a couple had distanced themselves from her, but a few tried to mediate. They described her as distraught, unwilling to eat, and spiraling into isolation. They worried for her safety and urged me to meet with her. Reluctantly, I agreed, on the condition that I controlled the terms. Using a prepaid burner phone, I arranged a meeting at the cemetery bench near my future grave. The irony of the cold, rainy day wasn't lost on me, and the thought of Molly surrounded by reminders of death gave me grim satisfaction. I didn't show up. Later that evening, I texted her, fabricating a reason for my absence. I claimed a health scare had landed me in the hospital and offered to reschedule. Molly responded promptly, apologetic and willing to meet whenever it suited me. Days later, I arranged to meet her at the playground where we'd taken the kids years ago. Again, I canceled at the last minute, citing exhaustion. Each time, Molly's tone remained accommodating, but I avoided committing to anything. I continued this pattern, eventually suggesting a meeting at an Indian restaurant that now stood where I'd once proposed to her. When the time came, I sent another excuse, this time joking that aliens had abducted me. Molly didn't respond, and I felt a flicker of satisfaction. I had less than 90 days left, and even as my body failed me, I still found ways to assert control over what little remained. Physically, I was deteriorating. Despite avoiding chemotherapy, I lost my hair, and my weight plummeted. At one point, I briefly reached my ideal weight, only to drop further, unable to stabilize. Amber, determined to help, began bringing me marijuana in every form imaginable. Brownies, gummies, and joints appeared regularly in my apartment. The cannabis eased my pain and reignited my appetite, but the exhaustion remained relentless. I slept up to 14 hours a day, cutting into the time I'd hoped to spend with those I loved. My dreams were haunted by Molly. Memories blurred together. Christmas mornings and Disney trips merged with the laughter of my children. Birthdays played out in my subconscious, with Molly always by my side. I could feel her presence, her warmth as she leaned against me, her perfume faint in the background as we watched William open presents, or Amber glued to the television. Waking from these dreams left me disoriented, longing for the past. And every morning, the first thing I saw was Sparky's warm brown eyes gazing at me with unwavering love, accompanied by the unmistakable attack of hot, smelly dog breath. With $1,738,456 left to my name, I found it increasingly difficult not to dwell on the impending end of my life. Yet, when I managed to be objective, I realized how fortunate I had been. My parents, though taken too soon, loved me deeply and left me with wealth and a flourishing business. They had expanded what they'd inherited, and I'd carried that legacy further. Throughout my life, I'd always had enough love, comfort, food, and security. Of course, there were moments when enough didn't feel sufficient. More time, more money, or even more children might have enriched my life. But it would be dishonest to say I ever truly suffered. Now, as the end loomed, I could look back on years of privilege, 2 children I adored, and friends who stood by me. Despite the bitterness surrounding Molly, it felt ungrateful not to recognize the blessings in my life. Determined to leave something meaningful behind, I bought a large house near Woking Sticks Manor, a foreclosure left unfinished when the previous owners ran out of funds. They'd intended to convert it into housing for Colorado State University students. I financed the remaining renovations and dedicated myself to overseeing the project, ensuring every detail was handled promptly. The work consumed my remaining energy, but it gave me purpose. As the renovations neared completion, William began taking long weekends to help, flying in every Monday or Friday. His presence made an enormous difference. During this time, we also found the perfect candidate to run a veteran's home I'd envisioned. A 52-year-old widower named Fred Schlott, who is both a veteran and a social worker, agreed to manage the house. I prepaid his salary for 4 years, placing the funds in a trust managed by William and Amber. To sustain the house long-term, I reached out to old friends and colleagues, leveraging every connection to rally support for homeless veterans. Their plight had always been a stain on the soul of our nation, and this project was my way of addressing it. The renovations took 4 weeks, and though I struggled with mobility and fatigue, I attended the celebratory event. The Poplin family jug band played, music I pretended to enjoy, and the local media covered the opening. As I prepared to leave, I saw Molly across the street watching. She looked terrible. I leaned against the car, letting its frame support me, and stared back at her. Neither of us spoke, and after a long moment, I asked Beth to drive me home. Her tear-streaked face stayed with me, haunting my thoughts, even as I tried to dismiss it. True to my doctor's prognosis, my health rapidly declined as I neared the 6-month mark. Amber moved into the guest room, William slept on the couch, and Ethan sent videos of the boys instead of visiting in person. Sometimes I thought I heard Shannon's violin playing in the apartment, but it was likely a mix of medication and dreams. Sparky, my loyal dog, refused to leave my side. Too large to fit in the wheelchair, he leaned against it, resting his head in my lap, or burrowing into the blankets I constantly needed. Fatigue took over my days, making long periods of wakefulness impossible. Despite my physical decline, I noticed Amber and Beth acting strangely. They often walked Sparky multiple times, but only to the edge of the parking lot, 100 yards away. They would glance out the window, whispering in hushed tones. It happened so frequently that it began to irritate me. William never participated, so I waited until he went grocery shopping to confront them. I told Amber and Beth they could let Molly in under strict conditions. She was to follow my instructions exactly and leave immediately afterward. Their stunned faces nearly made me laugh, though I lacked the strength. I reminded Amber of her role, stressing that if Molly didn't comply, she'd have to escort her out. Amber agreed, reluctantly heading for the door. She returned minutes later, looking uneasy. Amber explained that Molly was outside, struggling to compose herself. She described her mother as being in a terrible state and pleaded with me not to be cruel, even if Molly deserved little compassion. Her words gave me pause, but I remained resolute. I had agreed to this meeting for a reason, and it was time to face whatever came next. A soft knock interrupted the silence before the door creaked open. Molly stepped inside, and though she might have hated the description, she looked utterly worn. Her clothes hung loosely on her now frail frame, her hair was unkempt, and she seemed as drained as I felt. I greeted her simply, but with a hint of sharpness. She attempted to speak, her voice cracking as she started to form words. I cut her off immediately, establishing the boundaries I needed. There would be no apologies, no explanations, and absolutely no mention of Frost or her affair. The moment she broke those rules, I told her, the conversation would be over. When she started to protest, I stopped her again. My patience was razor thin and my strength waning, but I made it clear. Any attempt to excuse or explain her actions would result in her immediate dismissal. She quickly backtracked, agreeing to the terms and stammering another hollow apology. Turning back to Sparky, who wagged his tail with comforting loyalty, I stroked his head to ground myself before continuing. I told Molly the truth, that so much of what once mattered no longer did. But if there was any piece of the woman she used to be, any fragment of the devoted wife and mother she had been, that part would want forgiveness. I couldn't offer it now, though I promised to try, whether in this life or the next. Fighting through my mounting fatigue and the weight of the moment, I delivered my final request. I asked her to focus on our children. No matter how much they rejected or resented her, she needed to be there for them. She needed to be the mother she once was when they were small. And if she ever became a grandmother, she would have to carry both my role and hers. I wouldn't be there, but she would. By the time I finished, Molly was crying, and I felt the sting of tears threatening to follow. She looked like a shadow of the woman I once knew, aged beyond her years. I dismissed her, feeling too weak to continue. She paused at the door, glancing back at me. "I love you, Gordon," she said through tears. "I'll never stop being sorry. Even if you can forgive me someday, I know I never will." With that, she left, and I knew it would be the last time I saw her. Strangely, I felt at peace with it. In those final days, I began to see my life not as a series of disconnected moments, but as a complete narrative. It had been a good life, filled with love, purpose, and even gratitude in the last 6 months. Despite the pain and loss, I had found meaning and closure. When the end came, it was quiet. Ecom sat in the corner, murmuring a prayer, while Amber and William stood at my side. Amber's hand held mine, grounding me in my last moments. Sparky, my steadfast iron hulk, lay close, his head resting against me. My breathing became shallow, but there was no pain, only peace. I offered a final prayer for my family and friends, smiling as I drifted toward the unknown. The soft strains of a violin filled the air, perhaps real, perhaps imagined, and a whisper reached me in the stillness. I wasn't sure who spoke, but I believed it was Amber. Her words were a perfect parting gift, resonating with love and finality. "I love you."